Hey, welcome to episode 13 of the Ascendancy podcast. I'm Austin,
I'm Chris.
I'm Niko.
and on this episode, we have a special guest speaker, Niko Crowbar Stang. I've known Niko for quite a while online. He's someone who's out there really promoting a dialed in, consistent vegan message. He does very hard hitting street activism and great edits of his content. So it's a pleasure to have him on. And he's also someone whose popularity has really surged a lot lately, has been really increasing his following. And I think that's a testament to him putting out really high quality work. So, Niko, thank you for being here. And to kick us off and kick off the
Thank you.
episode, and thank you, is just to get to know a bit about you. How did you become vegan? And just wondering, was it a gradual shift or a sudden change? What's your vegan story?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I appreciate that introduction. I I like to start by saying that I was never an animal lover. I've never been had a companion animal, never had a deep connection with any animal at all. So it's so yeah, I actually dogs they like used to annoy me, and I would always be like, yeah, I thought they were like too clingy and too loud and always in my face and stuff like that. I've always been a cat person. I've always loved how cats are just like independent and like just like do their own thing. So for me, like going vegan wasn't really about. It wasn't from this deep love for animals, right? But it was more of like a collision of logic and like a lot of uncomfortable truths that I had to take in, and then I've always had this sense of justice. So I guess I that was like my springboard, you could say, to understand it. But unfortunately, though, it was a gradual shift for me. Um, I actually started off as being like caring. I used to care about like the environment. That's how I started eating more plant based in the first place. Um, I watched Cowspiracy many years ago, and I understood that like eating plant based was better for the environment, right? And so back then, I used to like bounce back between like vegetarian or just trying my best or whatever, right? Reducing, right? I thought that was like a great thing. And so the animals were never in my mind at that point at all. So I actually believe that like eating that the best and most ethical way to do this and most like environmentally friendly way would be to hunt and fish animals, right? So I actually, right before I uh, actually started thinking about or understanding what veganism was, I was about to get my hunting license, actually. And so, but then suddenly, uh, like random vegan outreach just like suddenly just started popping up in my feed on Facebook, like particularly Earthling Ed and Joey Carpstrong. And when I watched their content, I thought they made logical sense with their arguments and stuff. So I didn't really have any good excuses or rebuttals. I never came with any stupid excuses. I was just like, okay, it makes sense. I agree with what they're saying, but they didn't really hold me accountable. So I didn't really feel that the accountability part of it. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, it makes sense. But I was like, just like lazy and apathetic, right? That was the foundation. I understood back then, okay, veganism is the right choice ethically, right? But then I guess I don't really remember how it came about, but I just came across Dominion and I watched that, and that stripped me away of any ability to pretend that I didn't know what I was supporting, right? And after that, I actually became very militant. Uh, but I was a major hypocrite because I used to say to my mom, right? My mom used to host like family dinners, Sunday family dinners, and I said like, if you're not gonna have a fully vegan meal, I'm not gonna be there. But then I was a major hypocrite because I was still lazy and I would still choose the milk chocolate at the store, right? So so yeah, I was just like morally like I was like there, but then I was still funding the exact same thing that I was denouncing, right? So it was I was an extreme hypocrite. But I guess that phase taught me that uh, even though you not know that something, or even though you know what's right, it doesn't automatically mean that you'll do it, right? It's it's yeah, it's like often like a messy, hypocritical, and uncomfortable path, right? And um, but eventually though, I just stopped dodging responsibility and I aligned my actions with my values. And the only thing that I regret, that I know a lot of people, it's like a common thing that they can say, but like the only thing I regret was not doing that sooner.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I appreciate you sharing that. And it actually resonates with me too, because when I was first going vegan, I was learning about what was going on in the industries and learning about animal exploitation, and I was making the transition. In hindsight, I wish I did it a little faster. Like
Hmm.
I was still like justifying eating some of my roommate's cheese in like a quesadilla, but I wasn't buying like meat or anything. But it was eventually when I saw Gary Rofsky's speech that it stripped away any excuse. It put that accountability in the picture, and it made me fully like go vegan right there. So I can relate to that. Like there was that muddy period where I was like transitioning longer than I needed to. Like I kind of understood it, but I was still being like a hypocrite, like you said. And yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that. Anything you want to say, Austin?
I'm just wondering, was there any specific stimulus that caused you to, occasionally like so-called cheat, etc., to go like, okay, now I'm dialed in? Was it anything in particular that brought about that?
So yeah, there's another part to this that yeah, like or can you like what was the question?
Yeah, you said that at first, you were occasionally eating like milk chocolate or something like that, and eventually you got dialed in and you were like, okay, I'm going to be consistent here and reject animal exploitation. Was there anything specifically that prompted that, or did it just more so, just come as an evolution of your thought over time?
I think there's definitely one nail in the coffin here for me, and it was a realization of how it feels to be a victim, actually. So I used to have some really bad neighbors, and they would smoke on their balcony every single day, every 10 minutes of every hour of every day, right? And their balcony was like right next to my window, and I the smoke would always come into my apartment, right? And I always went out there. I came out there many times and asked them politely, "Hey, can you please go somewhere else? Can you please just smoke in particular hours and not just any time?" And they were always just like, "Hey, fuck you! We have every right to smoke on our balcony." They were like drunks and like super like low life losers, I guess. But but yeah, I was still being polite and just trying to like explain to them many times, but they would never listen. and and that feeling of like I can't do anything about this. Like it's terrible situation to be in, right? And then I kind of like looked in my fridge, looked at the cakes with eggs or whatever that I still had there, or like because I was pretty much like 98% vegan, right? Even though it's not a percentage, right? Um, so yeah, still the milk chocolates and stuff like that, and I looked at that and had this realization that okay, my so so I had just become the victim of somebody else's bad habits, right? And then I looked at those products that I had there, and yeah, the animals are actually the victims of my bad habits, because that's essentially what that was, right? I knew that it was wrong. I knew that it was unjustified, but it was a bad habit of buying these products, right? And so at that point, I understood that, uh, yeah, they go through a lot worse than I will if I just don't buy those products, right? But there's a big difference between me and the animals in that situation, though, in that I have the chance to walk away, but they can't.
Absolutely.
They are forced into this, right? So, I guess, yeah, that's that's how it came to me. To be fair, I didn't. I ended up not not being super friendly with these people. I started throwing water at them like every time they came out, so they actually became like afraid of me.
Hey, that's a very thought-provoking story there, and you know I think that empathy is such a critical piece of the equation, you know, and I think it's really actually powerful that you said that and that experience shaped your perspective because people can like get it on an intellectual level, and I think a lot of people get it, you know, on an intellectual level, but the missing piece of the puzzle is that empathy, right? So I think that's actually why when we do activism and we do like outreach with AV or any form of activism, when we show the reality of animal exploitation, I think that can really trigger a lot of empathy, you know, in a similar way to how you felt empathy for the animals by going through that specific situation. Hey, thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that. And Chris, you want to take that next
Sure.
question or anything to add on to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Very insightful exchange for any listeners. How important empathy is and putting yourself in the victim's position. It sounds like that's what really brought Niko around to becoming vegan and an activist. So we're happy that happened, and appreciate you sharing that. So the next question is, how has your view of veganism changed since you became an activist?
Yeah, so when I first got into activism, I was like hyper focused on the diet aspect, and I thought that promoting a plant-based diet in any way possible would be the best thing ever, right? To talk about, hey, let's try to get people on board with eating plant-based for the environment. Let's try to get them on for their health, right? All these selfish reasons, right? Because I thought that was because that's what like a lot of these like intersectionals or whatever um, said, right? So um, so I guess that's where I was at the beginning. Um, Even though I was like in the very beginning, before I got like shaped by the vegan community of where I lived, right? Um, I was like a militant, straight on. Hey, don't abuse animals, right? And but then they tried to change my mind and say, hey, you need to cool it and try to promote it in all these different ways. And I kind of like I got swayed in a way, right? But and then I just understood that but yeah, it didn't take too long before I like I had some. It was very like it felt wrong to do those things, right? So I realized that that approach just really just fuels the misconception that veganism is a diet, right? And that is a very dangerous path. And it just dilutes the message and makes it very easy for people to treat veganism as a lifestyle choice or like even yeah, like a harm reduction strategy or whatever. Like, um, and that is something that people can really just like tweak and personalize and opt out of whenever they feel it's inconvenient for them, right? And yeah, this harm reduction thing as well, this hyper focus on harm reduction is also something that I I started off with, right? But now I don't really think it's a great idea to be talking about that because yeah, like the utilitarian things, like the that whole thing, because it's like vague. Whenever you say that, oh yeah, it's about reducing suffering, reducing harm, it's very vague and it's soft and it's like it gives people a lot of like mental escape routes, and you're stuck. You end up being stuck in these like endless debates about what's less harmful and whether happy meat is better than factory farming or whether eggs from someone's backyard are ethical because there's no harm, right? Um, so yeah, I just think that's a very slippery slope that takes away from the core issue. And what changed my perspective was discovering Leslie Cross's veganism defined in his original definition, right? And it made me understand that what veganism actually was, and what it was created for. And it was actually created as an opposition to welfareism, right? Which is all about finding better ways to exploit animals. But veganism doesn't ask, how can we make exploitation nicer? It says, why are we exploiting in the first place? Um, and that's why I also stopped using words like abuse or cruelty in my messaging, because those words suggest that the problem is how we use animals, as if there is a right way to do the wrong thing. And these words also imply that enough regulation or kindness, exploitation can become acceptable, right? But uh, but yeah, I understood that veganism isn't about better treatment, but it's about ending the idea that animals are supposed to be existing for us in the first place, right? So, and if we attack the problem by the roots, then the weeds won't grow back. That's how I view it now. So that's like the strength of the exploitation stance is that it's very uncompromising and it's clear, and so people understand that yeah, veganism isn't about doing the least amount of harm. It's about rejecting the ideology that says that other animals exist to be used by us, right? And there's that when we frame it that way, there's no holes to be poked, right? There's no there's very few mental escape routes that people can go on, and we don't have to go into all these endless debates anymore. Because when we stick to this original definition, it cuts through the noise, and it's um, it's it makes it clear that it's a stance based on justice and not convenience, and justice doesn't ask for compromise, right? So um, yeah,
No,
anything you wanna
well said.
add?
Well said. I mean, when we get to the foundation of it, this is a stance against exploitation. This just gets rid of all of the BS, all of the utilitarian excuses, all of the ideas that there's a right way to exploit animals, to use them, as slaves, as commodities. And I think your shift that you've experienced as an activist is one that so many activists are going through right now. This is something that I see pervasive, throughout this vegan movement, is that when people initially go vegan, they have these ideas in their head, they have these misconceptions, they see how other activists are presenting things, and they think, okay, here's a way to handle a debate, here's a way to educate, here's a way to appeal to people's self-interest. But then over time, people are seeing, like, wait a second, this just isn't working out too well. People aren't really like getting this message, and maybe it's coming from the way we're explaining it. But when we get to this true foundation against exploitation and we put it on level with every other justice movement that exists, no other justice movement is talking about reducing harm to the victim. It's about ending the exploitation of them, ending the injustice, right? So I think that was, brilliantly well said, and thank you for sharing your story. Chris, any thoughts on that? Anything to add?
Yeah, those are both really good points. Thank you, Nico, for sharing your perspectives and how your mindset's changed around veganism as you become an activist. And I relate to some of the things you said as well. Like when I first became vegan, I was watching how other people were talking about the issue, communicating about it, and as you said, certain phrases and argument styles were very popular, like using welfarist terms like abuse, suffering, cruelty in every sentence that you could. And in hindsight, it's basically framing the issue as a matter of treatment rather than the exploitation as the actual like harm in itself. So over the years, I've strayed away from that, especially in the last year. And like Austin said, I'm noticing in the wider vegan community, people are abandoning these outdated and poor strategies. They're starting to realize this is the definition of veganism. It's about rejecting animal exploitation. It makes it very simple using the 70 long word vegan society definition about reducing harm as much as possible, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it makes it complicated. It makes these loopholes easy to find for people. These utilitarian calculations like, oh, backyard hens, maybe they're okay. Or maybe I hunt is better than a vegan living in a city. Like, no, it's just about rejecting rather, the exploitation in itself. So those are some good points. That's all I had to add.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah. So I also think that yeah, people think that vegans are naive, right? They think that we think that we can end all suffering or whatever, like reduce suffering and like we believe that we can like it's a save the world, save the planet kind of thing, right? Like it's um but I think that when we communicate with sharp clarity that veganism is a rejection of exploitation, not a diet or purity contest or causing the least amount of deaths or harm or whatever. It shifts the whole conversation, and misinformation spreads really, really fast on like the anti-vegan side, right? And but if we stick to the truth, right? I believe that if more and more activists will share this and start following this original definition, right, that Leslie Cross came with, I think that that needle of truth will be sharp enough to cut through whatever misinformation is out there, right? And because as a small minority, we don't really have the luxury of being really vague. And yeah, so I think precision and consistency is what this movement really needs moving forward. And like, I'm not against. I'm not. I'm not here to police anyone necessarily with their language. I'm not against using words like suffering, right? I'm not saying that that word should never be used. Or I think also think it can be good to emphasize the severity of everything, right? With like, I think it's good to be using words like slavery and the whole like animal holocaust. I see nothing wrong with those terms. It's just um, explaining reality, right? But when we explain the stance, right, the vegan stance, I do think that's when it's important to not say that a vegan is someone who is against animal abuse or animal cruelty, but it's someone who rejects the idea that animals are here for us, and um, someone who thinks it's wrong to exploit animals, to deny them bodily autonomy, things like this, right?
Absolutely, well said. And one thing that you've shared that's really resonated with me is your promotion of Stoicism. And when I see your content and I see you arguing, outreaching people in person, it's 100% evident to me that you're a Stoic, that you're someone who embraces this philosophy. And how did you come to embrace it? What's been your story with coming to this position?
So I stumbled upon Stoicism like 3 years ago or something, around the same time that I became vegan, actually. And I, uh, it was like I was on a rough patch. I guess I needed to find a way to like, okay, how do I control my inner state, right? My emotions and things like this, and um, yeah. So I guess yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what Stoicism is, it's I guess the core pillars of Stoicism is self-control and justice and courage and wisdom, and those things just really like clicked with me. So one quote by the Stoic Seneca, right? We suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that hit really home for me, and made me realize that a lot of my stress and things like that was actually self-inflicted. And so there's one analogy I like to use, and so following a Stoic philosophy is like being in a boat on a stormy ocean, uh, and you can't control the storm at all, right? You have no control over how the storm works, but you can learn how to maneuver the boat and adjust your sails in a way that will lead you to where you want to be. And I guess the core principle of Stoicism is that you are in control of what you can do, your emotions, your actions, and you are not in control over outside stimulus, but you can control how you react to the outside stimulus. And yeah, that just really, it's a great philosophy, I think, and I think a lot more people should read more Stoic philosophy, and it's a very helpful tool, right, in everyday life and situations where you otherwise wouldn't know how to like handle it, right? And it's I guess it's a lot of people think that Stoicism is like similar to Zen Buddhism, and it is in many ways. Um, it's about having this like inner peace and uh, standing standing strong, or not being easily triggered or put off by things in your life. But I guess the main difference between Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and Stoicism is that Buddhism is more like you become a monk and you just like become peaceful and just live as far away from people as possible and stuff like that. But Stoicism is kind of more created as like a tool for that you have to go through rough paths, and you should walk into the storm rather than walk away from it, kind of. and be resilient, right? So um, I guess it's something you can put into practice in your everyday life situations, and as activists, I think, and as activists for justice, right? Is I think that's it's a great philosophy to be following, because as because we meet a lot of bullshit, right? Whenever we do activism, a lot of people will be triggered by our position, right? And they will start hurling insults in many different ways. So that's why I think it's a great tool.
Well said. It's an extraordinary philosophy for people in general, especially as activists. One way that I think about it in life, if people don't stop and pause and think, who am I in this situation and what can I control? We're going to be pushed and pulled by all the forces around us, and that makes us nothing more than the sum of our environment. I think when we adopt this stoic framework to life and we can stop and assess and think, how do things align with my values? What can I do in this situation? Rather than being a reactive entity, we become someone who can fully exercise agency and dominate and command over our circumstances, even when things don't necessarily go our way. They give us this ability to accept our fate, but then also put us in a mental state where then we can regain control. Chris, what are your thoughts on that, and what do you have to add as well?
Yeah, those are some good points, and I'm familiar with Stoicism. I've learned about it several years back. I think around COVID, during that pandemic, is probably when a lot of people started to hear about it because it was, I think, popularized by Ryan Holiday a lot in a few years back. And when COVID was going on, people had very little control over the outside circumstances of their lives, and it was like a really important tool to use to be like, all right, there's a lot going on that I can't control, but I can, spend some time being mindful and improve myself and learn to just do the best I can despite whatever stuff's going on outside. And I like that analogy you gave, Nico, of the boat and the storm. It's like life can be a storm at times. We can't control outside circumstances, but if you can become the best sailor or captain of the ship you can be, and just make sure your ship is on point. Every screw is tightened down. Everything is on point, and you learn to navigate. That's really the best strategy to go through life with. And as activists, it's super important. And I see how you embody stoicism in your activism. When people are given these dumb excuses that we've all heard 1,000 times, it can be easy to get triggered by those things and escalate your emotional intensity to match the level of the person you're talking to, but that's not facilitative of the ends we are trying to reach. If someone's being aggressive or insulting, it's not helpful to escalate to that level and go back at them with that, because they're just gonna feel more righteous to ignore you. Whereas if you maintain your cool, people are gonna be like, all right, well, I feel kind of bad about being a dick to this guy. He's not returning it back to me. He's staying chill. So like, oh, I feel kind of bad. Maybe I'll listen to him more. And I've seen that happen in my own outreach interactions. When you just learn to keep your cool, it just makes everything better. And stoicism is a really important concept, and I'm happy we've touched on it here. Yep.
Yeah, and just for ourselves as well, I think it it makes us listen more to things and be able to think critically about things a lot easier, because we won't be offended by things that are said or done to us. Or so that's another thing that I think why it's important to why I really recommend people to start following this this way. I never like to say that I am a Stoic. I, I don't. I think that's a wrong term to use because I don't think anybody is a Stoic. But I do like to follow Stoic philosophy, and that's
Mhm.
how I would describe it.
That makes sense to me. It's
Awesome.
like a mental framework almost, you know, our biology, our psychology as a you know a species of animals that lives in certain environments means that we have behaviors that aren't always aligned with rational thinking, with reason. Our own nature can potentially cloud the truth. So we, by our very nature, may not be stoic, but we can embrace it as a philosophy and shift our mindset in a way where we can look at things through this lens and try to allow for our rationality to overcome our emotional disposition.
I have this foundation um, of just keeping my cool no matter what kind of pushback or negativity that comes my way during outreach. And um, yeah, so when you're standing up for justice, then people can be very they're not let's just say they're not cheering you on necessarily, right? Especially if they are on the side of injustice and want to stay on the side of injustice. Um, so
Yeah.
it really keeps you grounded. And I think one quote I want to add by Marcus Aurelius is the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. And that one really hits home for me. And I think it's good to whenever you're doing outreach, right? Don't feel the need to call them names, even if they call you names or whatever. Don't feel the name or feel the need to sink down to their level. I'm going to come back to that and touch on because I think that there's nothing wrong with making fun of them if they come with this very bizarre, stupid bullshit, right? But um, but um, but yeah, just like being in this word battle of like hurling insults is never a great idea. And I think that sometimes the best thing you can do as an outreacher is just to if someone says something crazy or bullshit or whatever, just stay silent and walk away. Actually, I think that's sometimes the strongest response.
Yeah, well said for sure. And that leads me to the next question here. What do you think are the best strategies for ending animal exploitation?
I think that it's important to just speak truthfully to people and unapologetically speak up for the animals, and that we need to stop watering the message down. Like it comes back to what I said earlier, I guess, about that we need to stick to we need to align ourselves as a movement and go down that road together. I think of hey, this is our stance. We reject animal exploitation. We reject the ideology that tells us we're entitled to exploit other animals. That's our stance. Hey, if you want to join us, come join us. And I think a lot of people actually agree with that stance, right? They just are not aligned in action with it. And I think a lot of people, when they reflect more and hear that this stance, I think it makes logical sense, and I think it makes um because it's a clear like do I want to be it's a clear justice versus injustice thing, right? And there's no mental loopholes you can go down. I mean, they can try to be like, oh yeah, um, but um, but what about like we can raise animals in a happy farm, right? And then okay, so do you think it's respectful to be enslaving and forcing them to breed and taking advantage of somebody's reproductive system? Is that the side of the side you want to be on? I think because it's very easy. I think once we just have that core principle that we follow, then I think that's a very it creates a uh, great foundation to call out the bullshit arguments that people come with.
Absolutely. Having a strong foundation and a strong ethical framework ourselves allows us to convey that strong ethical framework. And with every interaction that we have with people who aren't yet vegan, we have an opportunity cost to every word, every second. And when we don't get to this true core of the issue and we talk about these other things like diet or suffering or harm reduction or go off on these sort of tangents, this opportunity cost is that they didn't hear the truth. They didn't hear the absolute core of this message. So I agree with you 100%. You know, we have to stay true to this foundation. So that way, when we have interactions with people, we're laser focused because this could be the first time, you know, they've fully interacted with the concept. So in that first interaction that we have with them on this subject, do we want them to have an incomplete picture or do we want them to have the full picture, the full understanding? And not everyone will be receptive of it. Not everyone will get it. But when we do that, we can ensure we did our part to give them the tools to change. And Chris, what are your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I agree. I think any animal exploitation, it comes down to just being very authentic, being truthful, and being firm. And accountability is a huge part of this as well. Like Nico talked about, a lot of people they intuitively they say they're against animal exploitation when they see, for example, the footage of what's going on to the animals at a cube. They'll most people will say, "Yeah, I'm against this. This is horrible." But it's really important to drill in that accountability and be like, "Hey, listen, you know, you say you're against this, but you are responsible for this. You are partly why a slaughterhouse exists. You are partly why these animals are being enslaved." And without accountability, people can just kind of go on through their life just thinking like, yeah, it's wrong, but like, I don't really care that much about doing anything. I think accountability is a huge thing to stress here, and just advocating for the victims like we want to be spoken for. And, you know, so, maybe a certain people listening may push back and they say like, well, there's people who don't respond to the moral, you know, conversation. So that's why I talk about health and environment. And what I would say to that is that, you know, are you really talking about the moral, you know, issue correctly? Are you really slicing through and getting to the root of the issue? Maybe you're so dependent on talking about the health benefits of a plant-based diet or the environment, because when you talk about veganism from a moral stance, you're just not communicating it properly. You're using vague language, you're using weak language, you're being passive, you're not holding them accountable. I think it's wrong to just jump to other approaches, because if you do this the right way, if you get to the root of the issue and you come at it right, then that can open so many people's eyes right away, as opposed to being wishy-washy and, you know, coming to people with these other strategies. It's like if you just came to them with the hard-hitting truth right off the bat, I bet you would have got so many people to go vegan and just understand it. But because you aren't communicating it well, you're relying on these other strategies and talking about, you know, ways to serve their self-interest to get them to change. And I just don't think that's right. So yeah, some good points.
Yeah, I think you both came with some hard hitting points here, and I I think that I would like to say that yeah, because it's if we don't give them that accountability or and that correct message, then as both of you touched on, they might just walk away and just do nothing about it and don't feel that urge to change because they never got that question. Okay, so from now on, how many animals are going to be enslaved and exploited on your behalf? That's a question I always end with, because it's like it forces people to understand that they are responsible here. They are the reason slaughterhouses exist. And I also think it's important to recognize that yeah, when you touched on this, Chris, about these people who will go on to like the health aspect or the environmental aspect, and I think it's better to just walk away from the conversation if they're not receptive to the moral question, and because I think it's like it's a quote by this business guy named Jim Rohn, but I think it's very it's good to know and think about when we do outreach, right? Because and the quote is like, good people are found. You can't you don't make people good, you find them good. And so I think that's what outreach is, right? We need to we're here to find the good people and who are already good, right? Um who will make that change. And I mean, I get that a lot of people are extremely brainwashed and extremely conditioned by the society, and I'm not saying that these people aren't good necessarily, but I think that it's about finding the people who are willing who have enough compassion to be able to break through that social conditioning, and yeah.
Excellent points. One thing that I really like that you touched on is using the Socratic method, asking people a hard-hitting question that puts the ball back in their court, gets them to think critically, gets them to question their indoctrination, gets them to actually reflect on the animals that they could potentially victimize. I think that is such a powerful tool in activism and in outreach. And the second portion of what you were saying about how we're out here essentially looking for good people to be receptive is something that I've came to terms with quite recently. Going into it, I had this perspective, oh, there's some intrinsic goodness to the human race, and every person will potentially, make the change when they're exposed to the truth. It's just not the case. People have different levels of indoctrination and predatory dispositions just based on their neurology, etc. And right now we're at the very start, of this movement when it comes to numbers, when it comes to percentages of humanity. So I think due to this and due to the indoctrination people have, unfortunately right now people who are going vegan are a bit more exceptional, a bit rare, and we have to reach these early adopters of the movement. And early adopters of movements tend to be a bit divergent, from the general population. So we're reaching out there. But on another note, I also do want people to realize that you can be a regular guy and be vegan. You can be an ordinary guy, an ordinary person, and make the change. And that brings me to the next topic, the next question. And
I do
oh,
I do want to, before we go there, I do want to add one
yeah,
thing. It's like a bit of a separate thing, but I think it also relates to how we should advocate, and I think as advocates, I think it's important that we don't always we don't need to have a slick answer for every rebuttal against veganism, every excuse, because that's what we gotta like. I mean, as activists, we already know that like every argument against veganism is just an excuse, right? So, but when people, for instance, come with the plants, though, right, or any like brainless bullshit like that, right? I think that instead of going the scientific route and saying like, "Hey, but did you know that like plants actually don't have a brain and a central nervous system?" I think sometimes it can be good to be like, "Are you a fucking moron?" Like, I think I think it's good because it because a lot of these arguments are just people who just try to throw shit on the wall and see if it sticks, right? So if we can make fun of them and make them understand how stupid they sound and how extremely dumb their logic is, I think that can also be. I've actually experienced some people who respect me as an outreacher a lot more if I say things like that, right? Um, and will listen after they try to come with that stupid excuse. They will actually start listening more.
Absolutely.
Um,
You
yeah,
call them out on their bullshit. They see, okay, I can't play this game with this guy. You know, I was trying to derail him. I was trying to throw him off, and he caught me. Okay, let's listen to what he has to say. Great point.
yeah. And another one is this. So many people come with this. Oh yeah, but I only buy from a local farmer though, and saying to them that, oh yeah, it's interesting because everyone says that. Everybody who stops here tells me that they only buy from a local farmer. So and like 99% of animals are factory farmed, right? So who is responsible for that if everyone is buying from a local farmer? You think? Because it kind of like it kind of implies, hey, I know you're a liar, right? So, and I even in that situation, you could be like, so both you and I know that what you're saying right now is bullshit. So we can continue with the lies and the bullshit, or we can have a. But if you're not interested in having a an honest conversation, then I don't see it worthy of my time to be talking to you.
Couldn't agree more. Chris, any thoughts on that? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, those are good points, and I agree. A lot of people bring up these crazy excuses when they are confronted with veganism, and frankly, it's just stupid excuses. And I agree with Niko. Sometimes you don't need to go in the in-depth scientific debunking route. Just call it out as it is, just nonsense. And you didn't believe plants felt pain your entire life until you met me. How convenient.
Mm,
Like
mm,
when there's a burning building, you don't think about the sunflower plant in the pot. You think about sentient beings that are in the building, and like it's just stupid. So cut the crap. And when you call them out, I've even done this in my own outreach. When you call them out on it, they're like, they'll be like, I was just joking, and I was just gonna see what you said to that. And it
mm.
just it just it just cuts through and shows them like you don't tolerate any bullshit and that you're
Yeah.
serious. And I think there's a time and place to just call out people's stupidity.
Hmm.
For
And yeah, I like that. To give the to go straight to the example. Okay, so in a burning building, would you save a puppy or a sunflower? Or another one is, do you believe humans are animals? And then they'll be like, yeah. And then, okay, so do you think um, putting humans into gas chambers and farming humans and is justified because plants feel pain?
yeah,
Uh,
Yeah, those are powerful examples, and they get people to realize, I'm just saying some bullshit right now. At the end of the day, that's what it comes
mm,
down to. So I think it's good, to poke fun at people and play around with, what they say and show the ramifications of it. I think that's a great strategy.
yeah. So yeah, yeah. Paul Bashir, he taught me that like sometimes it's not about addressing the argument, right? And that's yeah, that's what he said. It's not about addressing the argument. So it's about just saying like, hey, I'm not willing to go this route with you. Are we gonna have a honest conversation or not?
Absolutely. It reminds me of one thing that I've thought in the past, and I've actually told people directly, there's no combination of words, there's no magic combination of words that I can say that will make this message resonate with you. Either you're going to understand yourself that it's wrong to violate and oppress other beings, innocent beings, vulnerable beings, or it's not. I can't force you to be a good person. You can only arrive there, yourself.
Hmm.
But on to the next subject, unless you guys wanted to add anything else to that, while we're on that subject. No, and,
No.
and well said, by the way. And a lot of people want to put vegans in like a box when it comes to perceiving us, and I think that's just the nature of the current political climate. Everyone puts themselves in a box when it comes to believing in ideology and having a set of beliefs. So when people think about us as vegans, they put us into one of these boxes. And the way that I see it is this box that people put vegans into, if they're a political ideologue, is always the opposite box that they're in. So you have people say they're on the right. Well, what's a vegan then? A vegan is a leftist hippie who's trying to force their leftism ideas on us. And if you have someone on the left, what's a vegan? A vegan is a colonist who's trying to force their right-wing fascist belief of veganism onto poor little indigenous people on a sinking iceberg with polar bears or some nonsense. This is how people are. But no, we're normal people. We're complex beings. We have all different values and beliefs and hobbies and interests. And that brings me to the next question. Niko.
I just, yeah, I kind of just want to add in a little bit thing there. I just think it's yeah, anti-vegan leftism has really been on the rise lately, I think, and it really just makes me throw up in my mouth, right? When they come with, are you gonna tell an indigenous person to not hunt or whatever? Because they just hide their bigotry and they hide their oppressive mentality towards other animals behind like these indigenous people or like poor people in minorities in other countries or whatever. And they say that they have the audacity to say that veganism is a privilege, right? And but what is a true privilege is having the convenience to deny or to yeah to demand somebody else's exploitation. That is a true position of privilege, right? And that's what these leftists need to understand. And it's um, it's really, really, I think it's very disgusting to be honest when they come with these
It's
things.
so disingenuous, man. It's a weaponization of a victim mentality because they're taught in a school of
Mhm.
thought, I'm a victim. Everyone's telling me I'm oppressed. I'm part of this subset of oppressed people. And then they go and turn around and use that as a justification to do horrific things to the most innocent beings on the planet. It's just very insidious, really as a concept, and it's always other people. What about this person? What about that person? Just dodging accountability. So right there with you.
And some of the most like yeah, some of the most like snaky people, in lack of other words. I don't want to like
The famous snake.
push down snakes here,
Yeah.
but yeah, some of the most like snaky people are like anti-vegan leftists, like because they're just there for social points. They don't actually care about justice. If they did, they would be vegan. At least they would understand veganism and not come with stupid excuses and bullshit to it, right?
Absolutely.
And and but the reason they are like really snaky, in my opinion, is because they claim to or they pretend, right, to be on this social justice SJW thing, right? And but what they're actually doing is that they're just participating and spouting for like the popular cause that is or like the current thing. right?
I just want to touch on one more point, to what he said, because I've seen no one talk about this, right? This is like such a
Mm,
rare topic. It's such a prevalent problem. I think when people on the left, and everyone, but more specifically right now, this large problem of people on the left using this victim mentality to exploit animals or use this as a justification. I think on some level they know like they're in the wrong, and also they're doing this to serve themselves for a self benefit. Like their claimed ideas about liberty and anti-oppression and all of this, it's all to gain social favor. It's all to look like a good person. It's all to show their friends and their peers, hey, I'm part of this in group. Look at me. I'm so much better than these other people. But then when you get to the true core of like exploiting others, of oppression, when it comes to how we treat the most innocent and the most vulnerable beings, now, nope, not looking at that. I don't care. It shows that this whole thing is a facade. If that's my thought.
because it's not a pop. Yeah, because it's not a popular thing to be advocating for, right? It doesn't give you social points. It actually gives you the opposite. Like you get ostracized,
Perfect.
and
Exactly.
that's not what they want. That's not what a narcissist want, right? They want people to praise them, right? And I think yeah, now I remember what I was going to say actually to this like whole victimization or whatever, like the victim mindset that is roaring in society. And I've actually during my outreach, I've actually experienced that um, that people who have actually experienced oppression are actually the some of the most the people who are actually the most receptive to the message, and it's particularly the um, older generation of Black people in America. I've had great success with outreaching to, like 40 plus. I think the younger generation of Black people in America who haven't actually experienced true oppression, they've just been like everybody else, right? Growing up and having the same privileges, but um, but yeah, like the older generation of Black Americans, and also, I mean, the younger, um, for I guess, yeah, but yeah, the older generation of Black people I've I've had exclusive success with those people when it comes to outreach, because I think that people who have actually understood oppression and actually experienced oppression will have a better foundation of understanding that it's wrong to do it to others. And I had so many people who have I haven't said it first, but they have said themselves that, like, there's multiple times I've had like Black couples who say like this is how we were treated. This is how uh, when they look at the screens, right? And this whole um, this whole mentality of viewing some lives as less important or of less value, right? Um, this yeah, this idea that some lives matter less is the root of all oppression.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
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 I think to the point you're making, it comes back to empathy. And I think there's many pathways that a person can arrive to having an empathetic perspective. One of them is enduring oppression or hardships or injustice ourselves. I think that's a strong one. It doesn't always, result in that 100% of the time, but it is true that people who faced adversity in life and know what pain is like maybe have a potentially greater capacity to see pain through the eyes of others, potentially including animals, as well. And getting back, to our next question, how people see vegans in a certain way. They put us in a box. They don't understand. We're normal, real flesh and blood people with many different hobbies and ideas and values, and we're not, a monolithic culture. We're just people who've embraced this one ethical principle. So, with that in mind, Niko, what are your interests in life? What do you enjoy? Who are you outside of activism?
Yeah, so I'm a person who loves being active. I love working out. I love playing sports. I've always loved playing soccer. I know that's the term you use for it over at your in your country, but I use the correct term, football, right? That's the correct term for it. I love football, and I and other sports. I've loved playing basketball, and I really want to get back into playing more basketball. Actually, I want to find like a group to play with here in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, when I'm there, and yeah, just love being active, going on hikes and going to the beach and eating healthy. I try to drink a lot of fruit juice and or not fruit juice actually, but vegetable juice, and then I eat a lot of fruits. And yeah, so and other than that, my background is in like writing and journalism. I have a degree in that in writing, and I wrote my bachelor. Or before I say that, I'd like to say that I one goal I have as a writer is to create works that will make people think, and because I think, and I also that's also back to like outreach and veganism and stuff. I think that creating something that sparks critical thought in people instead of coming across as like lecturing people and like I think that is something I strive for to do, right? Because I think if people can think, if you can make people think for themselves, I think that creates a strong foundation for change. And but yeah, I wrote my bachelor thesis on cancel culture and like the hypersensitivity of particularly related to comedy. That oh, you can't joke about things anymore. Like it's that's offensive or whatever to joke about. I think yeah. So I wrote yeah, I wrote my thesis on that, and in extension to my thesis, I wrote the script for a TV series that I haven't done anything yet, but yeah, it's about society's hypersensitivity, and it's a comedy series about that. And
Also,
yeah, I love traveling, and that's yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing some of your interests outside of activism. Those are pretty cool, and hoping to see some of that TV series come to light. That sounds interesting, and it's important. Like Austin, laid out before he delivered the question that we really care about veganism and activism, but we are not only about that. Like we're normal people who have other interests, and people like to box us into being like some fringe minority that's the opposite of their own position ideologically, which is also a good point. And it's we like asking this to every guest who comes on just to show people that we're normal people. We care a lot about this, but this is not our entire personality. We're normal people too. So it leads me into the next question and the final question of the podcast. As you mentioned, you're in Vietnam and you've been in Southeast Asia as of recent. So how does living there compare to living in Europe for you personally?
So the whole vibe of the place here, Southeast Asia and Vietnam, is really really speaking to me. It's a whole different pace, and Vietnam is super affordable. I come from one of the most expensive countries in Europe, like Norway, and so yeah, just being in Vietnam allows me to focus on my activism and work, and without being crushed by the cost of living. And it's also like aside like I really like this society. Like the people are extremely friendly, very genuine, and helpful, and very polite. And it's just um it's just an amazing place. And I love the climate here too. Like it's I mean, I love the cold. Don't get me wrong. I'm from one of the coldest countries in the world, right? And I love the snow and I love winter, but and I love skiing, winter sports and stuff. But there's something about just being in a like tropical environment that speaks to me. So it's really really amazing to just be on the beach and run barefoot on the beach. It's something I really enjoy.
That sounds awesome, man. I'm envious. I'm in Warsaw right now, so it sounds like you're in paradise there. So enjoy it. You spoke a bit earlier about,
Thank you,
your
thank you.
your interests, how you're active, you eat healthy, and I think just touching back on that, I think that is just such like a strong foundation to have in life that all of our thoughts and values almost stem from is cultivating, a healthy mind by staying active. So I think that's interesting. I notice a lot of people who are like top tier, not just as activists, but in the business world and in many different fields at the top of their game, nourish their life and their mind by eating healthy, being active. So it's one thing I wanted to note on there. But yeah, Vietnam looks beautiful. It looks like the food out there is incredible too. How's the cuisine out there?
The cuisine is fucking amazing, man. It's like I come from probably one of the most anti-vegan countries in Europe. Um, Both when it comes to legislation and like the leading party in Europe or in my country now is like literally the Farmers' Party, and so not a lot of there's a lot of romanticization of the farming industry, right? But so that leads to Norway being behind on like plant-based cuisine and plant-based restaurants and stuff like that, right? In our society. So we probably have 10 vegan restaurants in Oslo, my city in Norway. But in Da Nang, just the city of Da Nang has hundreds of vegan restaurants, right? So it's a great misconception that veganism or like eating plant-based is like a privileged thing that is like a white people thing in like a European colonial thing, right? Um, it's um, it's very widespread here in Vietnam, and it's just amazing, amazing food that they have here. They have Vietnamese cuisine is one of my favorites. I think it, it's second to Ethiopian food. I love Ethiopian food. That's my main one. And but but yeah, they have so many options, so many vegan spots, and they even have like all you can eat vegan buffets that you pay like $2 all you can eat. So
That sounds. I'm
So,
envious of that.
right, buy my plane ticket right now. We're heading over to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here in America, with $2, you can get a can of beans. Like that's about it. We don't need fancy vegan restaurants to be vegan, of course, but the money stretches a long way over there, man. That's impressive.
And Warsaw, Warszawa is known like the vegan capital of Europe, right? I've heard that so many times, and there's some vegan restaurants here. There's some good vegan options. When I say vegan options, you can buy any plant-based food, right? But you guys know what I mean. The processed vegan stuff. And there's maybe
Hmm.
15, 20 restaurants in all of Warszawa, Warsaw. If you look in Vietnam, there's just like hundreds. It's just like if you go on Happy Cow, this app where you can see where the vegan restaurants are, the entire place is just lit up, with vegan restaurants. So we have to go over there. We have to see what's going on there and experience it for ourselves. Sounds amazing.
And Malaysia too also has like an abundance of vegan restaurants, like probably 70 restaurants just in the city of KL, right? Kuala Lumpur. So it's you have so much to choose from. And in Thailand as well, another country in Southeast Asia, just a bunch of vegan spots. And Thai cuisine, along with like Vietnamese cuisine, is very plant-based by default as well. They don't really they neither of them use like cow's milk, or they only use like coconut milk usually. There's one topic, I guess, one thing I would like to talk about, that I would like for people to understand, because there's a lot of we've touched on this, but it's like this misconception that people have that vegan, like eating plant based or whatever, is like a privilege. And I've traveled many places, and particularly one place I want to talk about is Tanzania in Africa. I lived there for 3 months in 2023, and I lived in like a pretty poor neighborhood, and I lived with the guy, the founder of Tanzania Vegan Community. Henry is his name. Really amazing guy, and yeah, like the people there, they're not the richest people, and it's easy, extremely easy to eat plant-based there. And so whenever someone says that eating plant-based is for the privileged, or it's a privileged thing, they just don't understand the world, right? Uh, it's uh, it's extremely easy to get access to plant-based foods in Africa and Tanzania, and that's like the most common thing ever. And then, so like on the local markets, right? They have all these different foods, like 10 different types of rice, 10 different types of legumes and chickpeas, lentils, all these different peas that I've never types of peas that I've never even seen other places, right? And all these different fruits and vegetables. And so actually, when I was there, I that's where I really got my health in check, because I didn't eat all these processed foods and fried foods anymore. It's real authentic whole foods, plant based, very easily attainable there for a very cheap price. And even in the local pharmacy, you can get vegan B12 supplements. So there's no excuse for anyone anywhere. Maybe, I mean, uh, the reason the first and foremost, the reason there's no excuse to not be vegan is because veganism is a mentality, right? It means that you reject the idea that animals are here for us, and then you go by actions, certain actions logically follow, right? So so that means that literally anyone, even if you're in a place where you can't access whatever, you can still be vegan because it's a mindset, right? So, but even action wise, right? There's I believe that most of the world could be vegan like this in their actions. And so yeah, that's a myth that needs to be targeted.
Absolutely. Well said and great closing point. It's something I can attest to as well. I know vegans on every continent except Antarctica. I know vegans in the poorest countries. I know vegans who live in northern Canada, who live in sub-Saharan Africa, who live in the very poorest regions of India. I know vegans who are in the front lines in Ukraine. People all over the world have adverse circumstances, have adverse conditions, and they're finding a way. They're finding a way to not exploit animals. So when someone in the United States, one of the wealthiest countries, or someone in Europe, the wealthiest continent per capita, make these excuses, it's like you're ridiculous. It's crazy. So thank you for that. And Chris, and any other closing remarks?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to debunk, and I appreciate you, Nico, for sharing some of your experience with traveling around, Asia and Africa and these poor countries, these poor cities, and still being able to make it happen. And it just goes to show how it's not true. People saying this excuse is a self-serving justification to ignore veganism, because if it's for the privileged, then it's something I can ignore. But that's not the reality. You know, People of all income backgrounds can attain a vegan diet, and it's important to definitely debunk it. And yeah, it's a good point.
Yes, painting veganism as a privilege is very convenient if you have a victim mentality,
Yeah.
because then that's the way to deflect from it, right? And I'd like to tell one more story that I held a few speeches when I was about veganism when I was in Tanzania, and one of the groups that I held speeches for a few different types of groups. One of them was like young Tanzanian people who cared about like the environment, and who was like a part of this organization, who went to like beaches to clean up trash and stuff. So Henry like arranged for me to come to them and speak to them, right, about veganism. And uh, a lot of these young people were really receptive, and a few of them said after my speech that, hey, I really hear what you said, and I want to go vegan now. And and then there were obviously some regular excuses that you hear everywhere, right? Like, or just questions, I guess, like what about like other animals though, and what about religion, things like this, right? But generally, those were really receptive young kids. And on the flip side of that, I held a speech for there was this uh, community. It was like a Rastafarian community who invited like uh, who had this retreat of people from England and from the UK and from the United States, like African with of African descent. So they were all black people who who came back to who came on a retreat. They lived in the US or the UK, right? And what was interesting was that those people had paid like $4,000 to be on this retreat for 2 weeks, right? In Africa, in Tanzania. And there was one excuse I heard from them, but not from the young Tanzanian regular like slash poor kids, right? One excuse that I heard from them was, but veganism is a privilege. So So it was very clear that it was it was just, yeah, I kind of threw up in my mouth when I when I heard it from them, right? From these hyper privileged people from the West who came on this retreat for 2 weeks, and yeah, they were like super. They came with some of them were really receptive actually too. So I'm not gonna like bash all of them, but some of them were like really had this like disgusting victim mentality, and some of them even had the audacity to say like, how can you as a white person come in and lecture black people about oppression? And and I was like, regardless of how oppressed you are or your people have been, you have zero right to oppress anybody else. And then yeah, they agreed with that, and most people agreed with that. So they it stopped as that as that, but and then they yeah so yeah, it was a whole different vibe, and I think that ironically, this veganism is for the privileged, always comes from people who are hyper privileged.
Absolutely. I think the
Yeah.
reason why that is that this mentality of classifying X as privilege, therefore I can't do it, comes from a place of indoctrination. It doesn't come from a place of having a lack of resources or a lack of opportunity. People who face those actual hardships know what it takes to get by. They know they're capable of living and surviving. It specifically comes to people who've been indoctrinated into a very particular belief set who use this as an excuse for their actions. Niko, thank you so much for being a guest speaker. It's been an honor to have you. You've had so many thought-provoking insights, and we look forward to seeing you continue to grow as an activist. You already have such a big following and a big reach now, and I think this is only the very start of something really great. I think when we look 5, 10 years out and people, see your name, they're going to see hundreds of thousands of followers, people getting, the absolute truth, the core of the message in your content. So thank you for what you do. We appreciate it. And, where can people find you? Where can people see your work?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, so I'm mostly to be found on Instagram. That's my main platform at the moment. I need to start being more. I need to hold myself accountable to post more consistently on these other platforms too. TikTok, YouTube. Launched a YouTube channel a while ago, and I need to um, get that together. So, but um, but yeah, mostly Instagram, hashtag or not hashtag, at Niko Stangs. So that's where people can find me, and on Threads as well. I guess that's another platform.
Awesome. Thank you, Niko. We're going to share all your socials below. So everyone who's made it this far, look in the description and give Niko a follow, share his work. And thank you for joining us on this episode. Peace out.
Thank you,
Thank
Nico.
you.
Yep.